I found the camera tucked beneath a pile of moth-eaten jackets at a dusty flea market stall, its worn leather case giving off the sharp, bittersweet scent of old tobacco and damp cloth. The vendor's eyes flickered with something unreadable as he pressed it into my hands, whispering only, "It sees what isn't yet." Back in my apartment, I loaded a fresh pack of Polaroid film and felt the familiar click of the shutter release, the mechanical heartbeat of an object built for ghosts. I pointed it at the rain-slicked street beyond my window and watched the image emerge. Pale streetlights reflecting on puddles, a solitary figure glancing my way, except the date stamped at the bottom read tomorrow. My pulse thundered in my ears, the room tilting on its hinges as the hairs on my neck stood to attention. I ripped the photo free, breath ragged, and ran back the next morning to find the exact scene replayed, complete with a spilled coffee cup at the corner cafe. The camera's chemical aroma, sharp and metallic, clung to my fingers, and I knew I had crossed into something that should not exist. I held the device against my chest, the silence in the room suddenly heavy with possibility, and understood that I could no longer ignore the future it unfolded before me. It demanded answers, and I was already too enthralled to walk away. I woke before dawn the next morning, the hush of the apartment pressing against my ears like a held breath. The camera lay on the bedside table, its leather strap coiling around my wrist as I reached for it. I crept to the window and raised the lens to the glass, focusing on the empty street bathed in sodium lamp glow. Click. The Polaroid ejected, whirring with cold chemical scent. I watched the image bloom, the same earliest light, but at its center a silhouette hunched over the gutter, rain washing over dark, dripping hair. My pulse thudded as I realized it wasn't a stranger. It was me, crouched where no one had yet walked. The date printed read 2 days ahead. My breath caught. I tucked the developing photo into my pocket and dressed in record time. Every floorboard groan magnified as I raced down the stairwell. Outside, the night air was sharp with the promise of rain, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and distant ozone. I paced toward the spot in the photo, heart hammering, only to find emptiness. No figure, no shadow, just the hush of early morning. My reflection trembled in a shop window as I passed. I raised the camera again, hands slick with sweat, and fired at my own mirrored image. When the photo emerged, I stared until my vision blurred. Behind me in the glass was the figure, me, staring back with eyes wide in silent terror. The date read 3 days from now. Panic knotted my gut. I realized then that the camera wasn't merely showing moments to come. It was mapping my descent into something I couldn't yet fathom. Yet I could not stop. The next image might hold the key to breaking the cycle, or it might mark the moment I lost myself forever. That evening, the air inside my flat felt heavy, as if charged by the camera's unseen mechanics. I set up a single bulb in the corner and placed the Polaroid on the table, its glossy back still damp with the last image. Every breath tasted faintly of metal and ozone. I loaded another frame, my hands trembling, and pointed the lens toward the unlit hallway. Click. The flash cracked like a whip. When the photo slipped free, I watched the image materialize. The hallway, yes, but at its end, a door stood ajar, one I knew was nailed shut. And beyond it, a sliver of a child I did not recognize, face turned toward me with hollow eyes. The date read 4 days hence. Panic throbbed behind my ribs. I bolted from the table and crossed to the hall, each floorboard groaning beneath my weight. The door was sealed. I pressed my ear to the wood and heard nothing but silence thick with dust and memory. A cold spot bloomed at my collarbone, and the camera in my pocket pulsed like a heartbeat. I realized then that the future it showed was not fixed, but a warning. I could choose to follow its path or break it. I spent hours pacing the apartment, reviewing every shot, cataloging each detail until the night grew thin and tremulous. My reflection in the window stared back with wide, sleepless eyes. And I understood. To escape the fate painted by the Polaroid, I must walk into that sealed door 4 days from now and confront whatever waits behind it. There would be no turning back. The morning of the 4th day dawned in a low, gray light that seeped through drawn curtains like a warning. I ran my fingers over the camera's worn leather case, its edges soft from use, and felt the weight of every shutter click pressing into my skin. The apartment was unnaturally silent. No hum of the heater, no distant traffic. Just the faintest tremor in the floorboards, as if something paced below. I dressed slowly, each garment brushing my skin with a clammy chill, and carried the Polaroid down the narrow hallway. At the sealed door, I paused. My breath came in shallow gusts, and the air smelled of ozone and old metal. I knelt to trace the outline of the planks nailed across the frame, heart hammering so loudly I feared it would shatter the wood. With a breath, I pressed the camera to my chest and shoved. The boards groaned, the door trembled. A cold spot bloomed at my feet, creeping up my spine like liquid frost. I retrieved the last film pack from my jacket pocket. 2 shots left. Click. The flash flickered in the dim hall, and the Polaroid sizzled to life, revealing the door slightly ajar, a sliver of ragged wallpaper peeling back to expose dark void beyond. I stared, breath caught, as a dark shape within shifted, a child's silhouette turning toward me with empty eyes. No date stamped this time, only silence. My hands trembled on the splintered wood. The point of no return lay beyond. I straightened, camera ready, and pushed the door wider, every nerve alight. What waited inside would change everything. I pushed the door the final inch, and it swung inward with a groan that shook the walls. Beyond lay a small nursery frozen in dust. A broken crib, a lone toy car rusted at the wheel, wallpaper peeling in jagged strips like injured skin. The air tasted of damp earth and old smoke, as though the room itself had never shaken off a long-ago fire. Footsteps creaked behind me, though the floorboards were bare, and a sudden cold spot bloomed against my spine, sharp as a blade. I raised the camera with shaking hands and fired. The flash snapped like lightning in a sealed cave, illuminating the corner where a small figure stood. A child in a singed dress, hair matted, eyes fixed on me with a hollow, pleading look. My stomach clenched as I watched the Polaroid develop. The date already printed was today, but beneath it lay only darkness. The child stepped forward, its footfalls echoing in the frozen nursery. Each step burned my mind with revelation. The camera didn't merely show the future, it summoned it. Every image I'd taken had bound me closer to this moment, and now I stood at the precipice of the tragedy I was destined to replay. The ghost reached out, transparent hand trembling like dying embers, and I realized with sudden clarity that this was no accident of fate, but a cycle I had begun. My goal snapped into focus. I could not retreat into ignorance. I had to break the lens that trapped these lost echoes. With a cry that caught in my throat, I brought the camera down against the wooden crib. It cracked, shuddered, and fell apart in my grip. Springs and shards of glass clattering across the floor. The nursery trembled, dust raining from the ceiling, and the child's form flickered, caught between relief and sorrow. In that fractured light, the ghost's face softened into something like gratitude. The cold spot released its hold, leaving only a hollow ache where dread had lived. The Polaroid lay at my feet, now blank, as though it had never borne witness. I understood then that knowledge can be a prison as much as it is a gift, that some futures demand a price too high to pay. I stepped back through the hallway, camera parts dangling from my fingertips, and closed the door gently behind me. The silence was different now, lighter, almost forgiving. I slipped the shards of leather and glass into a paper bag and buried them in the garden beneath the old oak. And as the soil covered them, I felt part of the curse lift. If the chill of this tale lingered in your bones, show your support with a like, and whisper a subscribe to WhisperTales for your next nightly escape into anxious calm.